But I think when people see your commitment to signing up for the ride and your commitment to fundraise and why it's important to you, if they have the ability and the capacity, they will say yes and support you in some way.
This is the James Cancer-Free World podcast. I'm Steve Wartenberg, and today is an exciting day and podcast because registration has begun for Pelotonia 2022. This will be the 14th ride of this amazing, fundraising, life-changing, and emotional event that has raised more than $236 million for cancer research right here at the James. Pelotonia has funded the Pelotonia Institute of Immuno-Oncology, 4 statewide programs that have screened, tested, and treated thousands of people and saved a lot of lives. There have been 616 Pelotonia fellowships awarded to the next generation of cancer researching stars, and Pelotonia has funded more than 200 high-risk, high-reward idea grants that have led to a lot of breakthroughs and advances. Not bad, right? And so who better to talk to about Pelotonia than my guests? Doug Ulman, Pelotonia's CEO, and Joe Apgar, Pelotonia's president. Doug and Joe are both cancer survivors. They're passionate about creating a cancer-free world, and they'll fill us in on this year's ride, the routes, the new features, and the new Pelotonia and Victoria's Secret Women's Cancer Research Prize that was recently announced. Welcome, Doug and Joe.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Good to see you, Steve.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys in the middle of winter to have that optimism of Pelotonia is right around the corner.
Well, hopefully the snow starts melting soon.
Yeah. So before we get in and talk about Pelotonia, Doug, I heard recently you got invited to the White House to talk to President Biden about cancer research. So fill us in. This sounds pretty exciting.
Absolutely. It was quite humbling to have Pelotonia included in a major event and a major announcement at the White House, where the president and first lady and the vice president really doubled down on their commitment to what's called the Cancer Moonshot. And the Cancer Moonshot was created about 5 or 6 years ago when President Biden was vice president, and obviously building on his family's personal journey with this disease, they had committed the resources of the federal government to really reinvigorate the so-called war on cancer. And just recently, the event at the White House was to announce phase 2 of the Cancer Moonshot. And so again, it was a real testament to the Pelotonia community and all that has been achieved, both through the grassroots fundraising, but also through the research at the James, that we were included. And it was a thrill to be there, and most importantly, to hear how this new phase might be different and might create a pretty significant impact.
Now, I know it's probably pretty complicated, but can you give us a quick overview of phase 2?
Yeah, so one of the things that I love about this is that the White House has set an aspirational goal, and that goal is really quite simple, which is to reduce cancer mortality by 50% in the next 25 years. So it's a very specific outcomes-based goal, where everything sort of funnels up to that idea that if we could reduce cancer death in our country by 50%, that would be hundreds of thousands of lives per year over the course of many, many years, and really would put us on the trajectory to ending this disease as we know it. Some of the other things that I think are different and new this time around are a real significant focus on screening and early detection. We know that's where the biggest impact can happen the most quickly. And we also know that the pandemic caused millions and millions of people to put off their screening. So we were already behind, and we're further behind now. And so encouraging people, organizations, companies, community groups, schools to really spread the message that people need to get back on track with their cancer screenings is really important. So that's one aspect that I found exciting. Another is really access to care. So access to clinical trials, access to therapy. If we just delivered what we know works today to people who need it, we could save thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. Think about that. If we just delivered the care that you would get, Steve, or that Joe would get, or that I would get, if we were diagnosed today, to people who have not gotten that care in the past, we could save tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives every single year. And the other aspect that I just touched on briefly is, having been involved in several of these announcements over the last 20 years, the one other aspect that I think is really different is that they are really unleashing the entirety of the federal government on this. This is not just a Health and Human Services initiative. This is not just a National Cancer Institute initiative. They are creating a cancer cabinet, which will be made up of cabinet members from the federal government, whether it's Homeland Security, whether it's another agency. And they're really saying every agency has a role to play in ultimately creating this cancer-free world. And so seeing those other cabinet members on the stage actively participating was something that I'm really optimistic about.
Yeah. And the point you made about if the care that we have now is delivered to everyone, we'd save thousands of lives. I know that's a topic that Pelotonia and the James are really working on, this health inequities problems where people in urban and poor and rural poor areas just don't have access to healthcare. And some of these Pelotonia statewide programs are addressing that. And that's huge.
Yeah, no, it's so critical. And it's a huge priority for Peloton. It's a huge priority for the James and Ohio State. And, look, the pandemic showed us a lot of things. One, from an optimistic standpoint, it showed us what's possible in science in a very short period of time, right? And so we need to leverage what we learned from that to create more quickly breakthroughs for patients. But it also showed us that the economic inequality has just continued to grow, right? And so we have to close that gap, and we have to, as humans, we have to be able to deliver what we know works to people when they need it. So I'm optimistic. As I was sitting in the White House, I will tell you, I was thinking about all of the programs that this community has made possible. And I was thinking about all the programs at the James, whether it's the new diagnostic center, which people can call very easily and get access to screening today, tomorrow, next week, whether it's turning the page on breast cancer, that's hoping to shrink the mortality gap for African-American women with breast cancer across the state. I mean, there's so many examples of things we're already doing. And hopefully this new moonshot phase will shine the light and shine resources on things that are working.
And also, I think some of the things you just mentioned, some of the things Pelotonia funded statewide programs can be models for the whole nation.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think the White House is eager to see what is working out there and how can we replicate that, and how can we sort of supercharge it with more financial or other resources to reach more people.
All right, that was an excellent report from our Washington correspondent.
I'm happy to go back. I'm happy to go back anytime.
So, Joe, we're recording this a couple weeks before the March 1st start of registration. So, thank you for taking time in the midst of what I'm guessing is probably a little busy, hectic period. So, how do you and the team sort of prepare these last couple of weeks and get ready so you can? So, I mean, first of all, so that the website works properly and that people know about and are excited and you get off to a fast start.
Yeah. So, well, obviously the website, working correctly is critical, but our planning really starts at the end of last year, and it almost really starts right after the ride, from the previous year. And this year in particular, I feel like our team did an amazing job at getting out in front of some of the normal things we always have to do, but also in starting to think about how we wanted to change and evolve the 2022 event. So, we had our campaign, the new campaign done before the end of the year, before the end of 2021. And so we went into this year, had that all ironed out. I think for us, the last couple of weeks, we've really spent trying to plan out launch week and what that is going to look like and what's the best way to drive excitement to that March 1st date, and to be able to really celebrate that. So, if you think it's really been 2 years since we've had a typical launch, right? Back in February 2020, we had a really amazing launch of registration and did a lot of fun things that week. In 2021, we didn't get to do that. And so this year, we're really focused on having a really fun, engaging launch week. We're going to do a launch incentive, so a fundraising incentive for people that sign up. We're going to do some online, hopefully virtual rides, potentially on Zwift, potentially just using Zoom like we did the last couple of years. Registration will open on noon on March 1st. And then at the end of the week, on March 4th, we're going to have a celebration at Pins at Easton, which is a fantastic venue, I think, for the community. We've done events at the Pins downtown before, but the Pins at Easton, it's open air. They've got garage doors everywhere. They're able to make it what we think is a really safe environment to do something. And I think the community will be really excited to do that. And then, the other thing we spend a ton of our time is planning on how we can help and support the community, and how we can support the different Pelotons, how we can support new first-year riders, how we can support the volunteers and lead volunteers and survivors, and really trying to think about how we program our entire year to fit the needs of what our community wants. We're here to serve the community at the end of the day.
Oh, you mentioned that of how to serve and recruit first-time riders, which is always important to get these new riders involved, because once you get someone for the first time, the odds are pretty good they're going to come back. So without giving away any secrets, what are you going to do to reach out and get some new people riding?
Yeah, I think, step one for us is just getting back into the community. Most of the stuff we did last year was virtual, and we feel like, the opportunity to get back physically at events and doing outdoor rides and things like that's going to be big this year. Working with sort of just different groups and different leaders that we've had the chance to connect with over the last couple of years. And there's a lot of interest, as you know, there's a lot of interest in cycling over the last 2 years. It's really increased. And there's been a lot of people who've taken up cycling either for the first time in a long time, or they've sort of taken their cycling up a notch.
You can't buy a new bicycle these days. No, you got to order for 6 months.
Early in the pandemic, it was insane. You couldn't get a bicycle for close to a year at some places. So, really thinking about how we reach out to communities that, we typically haven't had the chance to engage with, or new communities that have emerged. We're lucky that Columbus is thriving in a lot of ways, and there continues to be new companies that just keep coming to town. Or small companies that have grown to be big companies in the last 2 or 3 years. And, there's, for us, we've got an incredibly strong corporate base. And I think what we've learned over the last couple of years is that those people move around too. And so you have somebody that might have been at Victoria's Secret for 10 years and they changed jobs and went to another company, and they're all of a sudden, they're our biggest fan inside that new company. And so, at the end of the day, for us, it comes all back to, are we connecting individually with the people in our community? And that is something we've prided ourselves on for 14 years now, is, authentically communicating and reaching out and developing relationships with the people that support our community. And you're going to see a lot of that this year.
Yeah, I hear there's a fairly big new chip company coming to New Albany that might be a source of new riders in a couple of years.
I certainly hope so. I think, I know a lot of our riders and people that live out that way and ride out that way are concerned about the roads and how the roads will keep up with that construction. But it's just super exciting to see a company like Intel come into town, with that many employees, and trust us that when the time is right, we're gonna be in front of them. And I'm really hopeful that we can get a really strong base out of the Intel and all of the companies that come with them.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of it this way, but when I used to work at the Dispatch as a business reporter, that was one of the beats I covered, is development and new companies moving in. And you probably cover that as well. Anytime a new company comes in, you put them on the list and go out and meet them. So,
yeah.
And the good news, Steve, is that the CEO of Intel happens to love riding his bike. So we have learned that through the grapevine. So now it's just a matter of making sure he becomes a first-time rider this August.
So you guys got to connect Doug with them then, right? Is that?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
There you go. Okay. Well, maybe you could have your friend in the White House give him a call to connect you. And
exactly. I'll get right on that.
okay. So this is what I'm always looking forward to every year, is to find out the routes. So last year, because of the pandemic, was a little different. I think there was 10 or 11 routes, and it was a little different. And it was actually, I kind of like that, doing a different route. So fill us in. What are the routes this year? And so I can plan.
So let's start off the route conversation by I will give a formal public apology on your podcast to the community about the 2021 50-mile Pelotonia route, which was a little, it was probably a misnomer, I guess. Ended up being 57 miles. And those last 7 miles were not easy. And so one of the things we're doing is we're going to move back to one of the things we did in the really early years of Pelotonia, which is calling the routes what they are. And so on Saturday, we're going to have a 20, a 57, an 85, and a 102. And we're working on giving them, some fun names and things that people can recognize. But there's no longer going to be a 7-mile miss on our part from a communication standpoint. I take full responsibility for that. I also got to ride that route. And I remember when my odometer hit 50 and I was like, oh no. Like, I know exactly where we are, and we are not close to the finish line.
I think I heard that same story from Dan Rosenthal, who told me that he got to like the last rest stop and he thought he had like 5 or 7 miles. And I think he saw your brother, Doug, who told him, oh no, you have 13 or 14 miles to go. And Dan sort of had the same reaction you did, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it was a common occurrence.
It was common. In the last like 500 yards into the chute at Bevelheimer, I was like, I'm going to hear about this the rest of the day. And I think
maybe to counteract that, the 102-mile ride should actually be 97, and everyone, people would be mad.
No, we determined people would be mad. If you're going to do a century, you got to do a century. So I ended up in New Albany and just started hearing about it, and most everyone was fine, and everyone was great sports about it. But that was a miss on our part, because 50 and 57, there's a difference there, especially if people haven't trained as much. And so then I went to Kenyon. I drove up to Kenyon to watch the finish up there, and I'm just watching everybody coming in exhausted. It was hot out, and so I see my 2 best friends that I ride with all the time, who are both really good riders. And I was like, how was it? And he was like, oh man, it was awesome. And a light literally went off in my head, and I was like, oh no, that's not good that he thought that was awesome. That means it was a really tough route. And learning that the final 20 miles is pretty brutal. And so there's going to be another split this year, like we've had in previous years. There will be an actual less hilly route. So that route we had last year up to Kenyon will become the hilly route. And so people that did it in 2021 will always have the badge of honor of doing that hilly route. And then we're going to do overnights in Kenyon again.
Okay, good.
Sunday's going to look similar to the 2019 ride from Kenyon. So it'll be an 80 and 100 back from Kenyon to New Albany. And then we're going to also do the same 38-mile loop route that we did starting and finishing in New Albany. That was really popular this year or last year. And so we're going to replicate that this year. So got tons of route options. We feel like, really excited about just some of the tweaks we're making. And I think the community will be excited too.
So on Saturday, the 85-mile, well, let's start at the beginning. The 20-mile route is going to be from downtown to New Albany.
Yep. Yeah. Same as 2021.
And the 57 downtown to New Albany.
Yep.
The 85.
New Albany to Kenyon.
Okay. That's what I thought. New Albany to Kenyon. And the 102 is from downtown to Kenyon.
Yep.
And will Reynolds Road be on these routes?
Reynolds Road. I'll have to look. I actually don't think Reynolds Road is on the routes.
Yeah, because when you said
Yeah.
that you're gonna, the hilly route last year did not include Reynolds Road, so but
Yeah.
there'll be enough
I-
hills to keep people happy.
Yeah, I was going to say, trust me, there's enough. When you get out in that part of the state, when you turn on the roads, everything's like, they're pretty simply named. But then there's the roads that have hill on the sign, and there's tons of those, and we'll be going on several of those. So, just because we're losing Reynolds Road does not mean we're losing some challenging hills.
Okay, so have you guys decided what routes you're going to ride?
So this is tough. So like ride week and ride weekend's just exhausting. And by the time Saturday morning rolls around, I'm pretty tired. Doug's given me a really hard time the last couple of years for not riding the 100. And so I think this year I'm going to ride the 100 on Saturday, and then I'm going to make a game time decision about Sunday.
Doug, you just made a face as if you didn't give Joe a hard time.
Well, I do give him a hard time. That's
okay.
Accurate. However, it's because he has publicly said for many years that Pelotonia is the most significant weekend of the year for him, and so I don't know why he enjoys doing it halfway. But so that's why it's just a question that's out there. And what I would say is, more importantly than the route, is signing up as a high roller, right? So we will be raising enough money to cover
Right.
the full distance. Whether we do it or not, I don't know. But I can attest to what Joe said, is that 100 miles last year was hard, like real hard. And I enjoyed it, and I thought it was very challenging.
What I remember, I did that, and toward the end, and I think this happens almost every year. There is someone's at a rest stop who makes their own rest stop, and the guy, trying to be really nice, he goes, "Oh, you only have 2 miles to go." And you go, "Okay, only 2 miles to go." But the problem is there's 5 miles to go and 3 more hills. So
Of course. And those people mean so well.
Yeah.
And they've set up water and towels and all this stuff, but they don't realize the psychological toll that inaccuracy
Right.
causes when you're finishing those 2 miles and you still have a few left.
Yeah. One of the things, speaking of sort of those unsanctioned rest stops for the longer routes, so for the 57, the 85, the 102, we are actively looking at how we add sort of what we're deeming internally sort of light rest stops that are in between the final formal rest stop and the finish line. And we've just recognized that, doing 16 to 20 miles through the whole route from a rest stop standpoint works for the first part of the route. But when you get, towards that end of 100, having something that's 8 to 10 miles out, where you can refuel and take a break would be significant for people. So we're looking at ways to do that this year too.
Now, Doug, you mentioned high rollers, and fundraising, of course, is the lifeblood of Pelotonia. And before I ask you guys some tips on fundraising and how you do it, I just want to, from my own personal experience, I was very, very nervous that first year about raising, gosh, I can't even remember. I think it was 2,000 or 2,200. I'd never in my life raised money before. I donated, 25 and 50 here and there to when people asked, but I never actually raised money. And it's intimidating, but it turned out to be so much easier than I thought, and that people want to contribute and want to be part of it, particularly now that they know Pelotonia. And I've formed my own little team of family and friends who every year help me out, and it kind of grows. But since fundraising is so important, and I know you both are experts at it and have raised a lot, what are some tips for people out there who might be a little nervous about having to commit to more money than they've ever tried to raise before, or like in my case, having to raise money for the first time?
Yeah, I think your experience is pretty normal, right? There's typically a psychological hurdle if you've never done it before, which is natural because human beings have an aversion to asking for help. And in some ways, this is an ask of your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, your community. But once you actually do it, you realize, one, how generous people are, And two, you oftentimes realize that there are so many people in your network or in your community that are touched by this disease that you may not have known about. And that happens almost every year for me, where I'll get a donation from someone that is maybe more than I expected. And it comes with a note saying, my relative was just diagnosed and this means so much to me at this very moment. And so on the one hand, I feel like fundraising, this grassroots peer-to-peer fundraising, you're giving people an opportunity to express their support financially, but even more than that, you're giving them a chance to participate in something that is so meaningful to so many. So my advice is always just to make it as personal as possible, because when you share why you're doing something, I believe that people will say yes almost every time if they have the capacity to do so. And the only time I've ever had people say no is when they are doing something for the community that at that moment in their mind is more of a priority for them. And by the way, that's a good thing, right? So if somebody says, oh, I can't support you right now because I'm, giving to this educational organization, or I'm helping people who need a place to live or need food, like, great, thank you for what you're doing. But I think when people see your commitment to signing up for the ride and your commitment to fundraise and why it's important to you, if they have the ability and the capacity, they will say yes and support you in some way.
Joe, what are your secrets, or what's your strategy?
Yeah, I think everything Doug said is spot on. I think, sharing your story and sort of why you're participating is, I always think of that as step one. And a lot of times that's the only step you need. I think what's important for people to recognize is, and Doug and I see this a lot and sort of have dealt with this a lot, which is a lot of people don't think their story is good, or their connection to a cancer story is good enough, right? It's, well, I'm not a survivor. I had a family member diagnosed, and we hear this all the time. And Pelotonia is this opportunity for people to take action and be in control of something in cancer, which is largely an uncontrollable, experience for a lot of people. And so, but you don't have to be a survivor to have a great reason and great story to participate. And I've never met anyone that didn't have some sort of connection or story to cancer. And I have yet to meet a single person. Yet a lot of people don't share those reasons sort of outwardly because they don't think they're, as strong of stories as someone who survived cancer. And like, I even deal with it with, in my own family. My sister had cancer. My sister had a really different cancer experience than I did. She did chemo for 2 years. She was 5 years old, lost her kidney. She was in, Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh for months. My parents lived in a hotel for months. Now, I had a couple surgeries and some complications, but it was a completely different experience. And even she and I have had conversations of like, well, I didn't have it as bad as you. There's always this comparison of stories to people. When people figure out how powerful their own authentic individual story is to their own network and community of people, it's really powerful. And we see it all the time. And we see people who put a, really strong profile story up on the website, or, share an email that's really personal in their reason for doing it. Those people are wildly successful with fundraising. So I always just encourage people to understand what your story is and share it from your heart, and that'll resonate with people.
Yeah. And you're right that everyone has been impacted by Pelotonia. And as you were saying that, I was thinking that in the past 2 months, twice, a neighbor and one of my wife's good friends both were diagnosed with breast cancer at a different medical center. And both times we said, hey, we know someone at the James, Doreen Agnese. This is her specialty. And we connected them with Doreen, and they went to see her and get this great care. And this, and that's a story I'm going to tell people when I ask for funds, that everyone is connected, and there's no like one story is better than the other. They're all to each person the most important story in their lives at that moment. So There you
Yeah.
go.
And the only thing I'd add to that, Steve, is there's the personal aspect of why people are motivated to either participate and or contribute financially. And the other thing that we're doing more and more of is really just connecting these researchers to the community, because the inspiration that riders and volunteers and supporters get from hearing firsthand why this financial support is so critical. And when you can hear a young scientist say, gosh, this is the first grant I ever got, and it allowed me to pursue my passion and my hypothesis and launch my career, or you hear a senior scientist like Zihai Li talk about the future of immuno-oncology, those are really powerful things to say, gosh, we're playing a small part in creating a future where everybody gets access to these state-of-the-art therapies.
Yeah, not only do we as riders get to play a small part in that, we get to meet these people during
Correct.
the year and at Pelotonia and talk to them. And that's amazing.
Yeah. And they're heroes and they're doing the work every day. And I think historically they were behind closed doors, and I think in a way Pelotonia has humanized them and brought them out into the community so people can learn, engage, be inspired. And frankly, what a lot of those physician scientists have done over the last 2 years during the pandemic has been nothing short of miraculous. And I think the whole community is grateful for what they do from a cancer standpoint, but also what they do from a broader healthcare standpoint.
We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Doug and Joe will fill us in on the new Pelotonia and Victoria's Secret Prize. In today's world, misinformation abounds. But at the Ohio State Health and Discovery website, we're addressing today's most relevant health, wellness, science, and research topics, all from the Ohio State experts you can trust. We're tapping into physicians, scientists, and thought leaders across our medical center and health sciences colleges to give you the deeper story behind the headlines and the truth about the topics affecting the health of individuals, society, and the world. Visit health.osu.edu today. We're back with Doug Ulman and Joe Apgar. And before we get to the Pelotonia Victoria's Secret Prize, Joe, I'm curious, opening ceremonies. I did not go last year. I regret not going because it was at the beautiful new lower.com stadium. Where will it be this year?
Yeah, so we were obviously thrilled to be able to have opening ceremony last year, and extremely grateful for the Columbus crew and ownership for letting us have the stadium for the evening. But we're going to move back down to North Bank Park, McPherson Commons, sort of what people have known for the last 6 or 7 years prior to that. And but we're going to switch some things up. We're going to move the location of the stage and some of the other sort of key elements of that area, and get back to the festival-like feel that we've had and sort of people have come to love, but give people a brand new experience and vantage point down there that I think will be pretty special.
Now, I'm guessing you're going to have some pretty prominent speakers, but I'm also guessing you're probably not going to divulge them right now.
We're not going to divulge them right now.
Can you just just whisper it to me? I won't tell. No. Okay.
I can't give away any of our secrets at the moment, but
you're saving that for your own podcast, aren't you?
We'll save that for our own podcast. And,
there you go.
So we'll visit on that at a later date.
Okay, good. Well, that keeps us guessing and makes it so we have to attend the opening ceremony. So
now you have to have us back on the podcast to do a preview of opening ceremony.
Okay, so let's jump into the Pelotonia Victoria's Secret Prize, which it sounds really cutting edge and really exciting. And it reminds me of like prizes like the ones that I forget the name of it, but for $10 million for the first person that had a successful rocket. And back in aviation history, they used to give prizes for the first person to like fly across the English Channel. So fill us in on the Pelotonia Victoria's Secret Prize, how it kind of came about and how it'll work.
Sure. Well, as you know, we've had a long-standing partnership with Victoria's Secret, and they have participated actively in the ride for the last 12 or 13 years. They've raised millions and millions of dollars for Pelotonia and ultimately research at the James. And so during conversations last year, as they were explaining to us how they were reimagining their brand and some of the things they were interested in doing, it became clear that they are most passionate about supporting women and supporting women in all aspects of their life. And so we started a dialogue and ultimately presented them with some ideas that they could think about embracing. And one of those ideas was to really focus on funding female scientists around the world who are focused on women's cancers. And the reason for that is multifaceted, but one aspect that's so important is that women tend to be underfunded in biomedical research. They tend to leave the field for any number of reasons, right? So maybe they leave to have children and don't come back. Maybe they can't access enough funding, and so they go in a different direction with their career. All of these things have added up to a huge gap in terms of the amount of research funding going to women. And then you couple that with cancers that predominantly impact women. And so how do we marry those two things together? So they loved the idea. They immediately wanted us to come back with more concrete plans, which we did. And the result of that is something called the Victoria's Secret Global Fund for Women's Cancers. And within that fund, there are going to be several different opportunities for female scientists around the world to access funding. So as you mentioned, there will be a prize element. There will be an element that funds some of the top, most senior women in the world who then will mentor younger women in their field. And so we're excited about this collaboration, and ultimately also excited that it will be co-chaired by Electra Pasquette, who's one of the associate directors of the cancer program at Ohio State. She also happens to be a cancer survivor. And so she brings to it both a personal and professional passion. And so we're thrilled to have her sort of co-chairing the scientific advisory committee to figure out, what is the highest and best use of these dollars as they get distributed.
Wow, Electra's a superstar.
She is.
Cancer. Yes, she's done studies all over, and she's leading the new breast cancer study too with Heather Hampel. So
absolutely. And just as an aside to this whole global fund from Victoria's Secret, one of the most exciting things for us is that Victoria's Secret is really going all in on this notion of women's health. So you mentioned Doreen Agnese earlier in our podcast today. Doreen did an Instagram live on Victoria's Secret's Instagram page in October, all about breast cancer, about screening, about early detection. And the reason I mentioned that is, Victoria's Secret has a massive, massive global reach. I think there's 75 million, followers on Instagram. And so to be able to put an expert like Doreen in front of that many people around the world to help educate them was awesome. The other thing I would mention is that last October, for the first time in the company's history, Victoria's Secret came out with a new product. It was a mastectomy bra, which is a product that women all over the world have been asking from companies over the course of time. And that product, not surprisingly, sold out very quickly. And it just shows you the need, and it shows you the desire of people out there to have products designed and manufactured and developed for cancer patients, for cancer survivors. So the partnership, while it includes massive funding for female scientists, it also is including education, outreach, and product development.
So how much is Victoria's Secret pledging to this project?
Yeah, so they're pledging a minimum of $8.5 million over the next 2 years, which is amazing because that is separate and apart from their participation in the ride, separate from what their employees and partners and colleagues are raising. It's separate from their incredibly generous match that they provide for their employees and their families. And so we're all just blown away by their continued and expanding support of our mission.
Wow. So this leads me into my next question. You guys recently announced that you have this pretty amazing goal that by the year 2026, you want to raise $50 million, which would effectively double kind of your previous best year. So this sounds like one of the ways, one of the collaborations that you'll use to get there. So I'm wondering if there's other ideas, other companies you're working with, other routes to get to this $50 million a year.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we're super excited about, the $50 million goal. That's the first time our organization's ever put a big goal out there. And we received just tons of positive feedback about it. I think people love being involved in something that is reaching for something big. The Victoria's Secret thing is super, super special. And I think, what we've realized is we can be a platform, to help companies do even bigger and sort of broader things in their own communities. Victoria's Secret being a really good example. We're seeing, things like MI Homes, who, local home builder headquartered here, but they have offices all over the country. I think in close to 15 or 16 different markets all around the country. And last year in Houston, they sold a house. They built a house, had all of their subcontractors sort of contribute in different ways, and they sold a house for charity. And Pelotonia was that charity, and it raised more than $150,000 that they donated to Pelotonia. And they've realized the scale of their business and what they could do for Pelotonia, for cancer research, and really for their community. And so they've got a goal to get, that home sale program out into more markets this year. And we think that they'll raise potentially a couple $1 million in 2022 through that program. So I think, for us, it's, our commitment is to building this movement and our community to be as broad and far reaching and as impactful as we can possibly make it, and to be a platform for others to do the same. And I think companies realize that there's a lot of value in a lot of different ways to do that.
So I take it you might be working on a couple other similar type collaborations that you might not be quite ready to announce unless you want to.
No, your intuition's good. Your intuition's good on all fronts there.
You're frustrating the journalist in me, but I'll let you go. Okay. I won't push you.
Steve, I think the most important thing, and one of the unique aspects of Pelotonia, is that we have been so fortunate to have some of these large partners who not only have supported the organization financially, have not only inspired their team members to participate and provided support for that, but now they're realizing that they might have a national or international footprint, and that they could help reach more people with messages of education and screening, the importance of research, and ultimately help raise more money. And so we're very excited to have those conversations with our existing partners and new partners about what might be possible.
Yeah, you're right. With technology, it's a much smaller world than it used to be, and it's easier for companies to have a national and international footprint. And there's some great companies here in Columbus that, that could work for. So
absolutely.
Well, let's finish up. I always like to ask you guys a bit of a personal, maybe even philosophical question. And as I started off the podcast saying, you're both cancer survivors at a relatively the same age while in college at a really formative age. So I'm curious that, of course, a cancer diagnosis is never a good thing, but it seems like perhaps some good things and some direction in life came out of your cancer diagnosis and treatment for both of you.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I was 21 when I was diagnosed, which I think was a couple of years past when Doug was diagnosed. So he was diagnosed much, much earlier than me, way back in the 90s, I think.
So you're calling Doug old, but okay, got it. Okay.
But no, I think it's a really interesting experience. It provides perspective. If you talk to any cancer survivor, I think you talk to perspective is one of the words that often enters the conversation. I'm I'm always pretty thoughtful about how I spend my time. I always have been, even as a kid. I really sort of engaged in things I wanted to do, and I tried to shy away from things that I didn't want to be spending my time on. I was always just super thoughtful about my time, and I think that is something that got really exacerbated after I did have cancer. My dad said something to me years ago that I thought was really interesting, which he is not known to be sort of the most emotional or, philosophical person. But he sort of just remarked, he said, he thought the biggest change he saw in me was that I jumped at every opportunity that I could now to make a better, more fun, exciting life for myself and the people around me. And that my desire for things went away and my desire for experiences and relationships filled all that space. And I think, I think that that's spot on. And I think the thing cancer sort of teaches you in a way is, the relationships that you have and the people that come out to support you and do things for you. And, you can almost never repay them for that, but it gives you a good perspective on life. And I think for me, ultimately led to changing careers, which, to a lot of people seemed like a really sort of wild and bold move. But personally, it felt really like the only thing I should be doing. And I feel really lucky to wake up every day and do this work and get to meet the people I meet. And I think I've got the best job in the world. So, wouldn't second guess it for a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Hard to follow that. I agree. I agree with everything Joe said. And, perspective is important. And one thing that cancer or cancer diagnosis brings is immediate perspective. And, it's not lost on me, and maybe we shouldn't say this, but we're recording this on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And so, I think relationships become much more important. The relationship that I have with my parents and my brother were always very close. Cancer only made them even more significant. And I think you just cherish opportunities. Like Joe said, you jump at opportunities in a way that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, because you don't take things for granted. And you definitely don't take relationships for granted. You definitely don't take friendships. And having learned that at an early age, I think was actually very, very helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you both for sharing. And it's this, as I mentioned, Pelotonia registration has begun. I'm gonna sign up today, and hopefully we can set a new record for first day or first week number of registrations. And before we go, Joe, you want to give a quick promo for the Pelotonia podcast that you host?
Yeah, so this will be season 4 of the One Goal podcast that we've recorded and produced over the last couple of years, and excited to continue sharing just some of the amazing stories of the Pelotonia community and beyond. And we really use it as a platform to uncover and dive deep into some really personal things from people. And it's been sort of an honor of my lifetime to be the host of that. And I think this year we kicked off season 4 with a podcast about the Major Taylor Cycling Club locally in Columbus, and was an incredibly fun episode to record. A great group of guys, and stay tuned for more great episodes this year.
All right. I listened to that episode. It was great. Thank you both, and I'll see you soon.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Steve.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center, Arthur G. James Cancer Hospital, and Richard J. Solove Research Institute. For more information, check out our website, cancer.osu.edu.